For well over 30 years now, the Toyota 4Runner has been Toyota's formidable off-road machine, one of their best-selling models after all, and it's made a lot of sense for people that can't quite afford a Land Cruiser but still want a Toyota that looks cool, has four-wheel drive, and can take them pretty much anywhere. Ever since the late 1980s, early 1990s, the 4Runner has absolutely killed and delivered on its sales targets and its reputation with buyers. But after the previous generation, Generation 5 of the 4Runner was pushing 15 years on the market, it was obviously time for an update. And since Toyota has just updated the Tacoma with a brand new look, brand new interior, and brand new hybrid powertrains available, they decided to do the exact same with the 4Runner, ushering in the era of the Mark 6. What you can see before you is the 6th generation 4Runner with the base level trim, that is the 4Runner SR5. Starting at just about $41,000, you can get yourself into a 4Runner SR5 with the base powertrain, which is a 2.4 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine that is shared with lower end versions of the Tacoma that I've already reviewed. So we've already looked at that engine in that video, but we're gonna look at it again here in a minute. And it also comes with optional 4-wheel drive and a standard 8-speed automatic transmission. And yes, I did say optional 4-wheel drive. If you're looking at a 4Runner and you want a 2-wheel drive version for whatever weird, strange reason, but what we have here is the 4-wheel drive version of the SR5, which is what I believe most people will end up actually buying. So on that note, let's embark on a review type tour and look at the new 4Runner a little bit more closely. When it comes down to the all subjective issue of styling, I think overall the 4Runner has some good points and some bad points, but I don't think it's as good looking as certain variants of the old 4Runner. And before we get into the details of that, I would like to note the fact that this car, once again, it's the SR5, it's the base level, so it has the base level tires and base level wheels. If you get the TRD Off-Road and the TRD Pro and the new Trailmaster trim, you get these special off-road tires that are a bit bigger, more aggressive looking wheels. This 4Runner being the base level SR5, once again, is the 4Runner that people are going to be commuting in and taking it off-road occasionally. They're just going to be driving it 365 days a year, no matter the weather situation. That's what these things are mostly for, but every once in a while you want to do some off-roading. This one just has these smaller tires, like I said, which don't fill the wheel arches as well as the larger tires. So you end up seeing a little bit more exposed suspension components and bits of the chassis, which is still body on frame, by the way, and some wires and cords and things like that. I don't know, something that I just noticed literally 5 seconds ago walking up to the car. It's a reminder that of course you didn't pay up as much for the TRD Off-Road or the Pro or the Trailmaster, or what is it called? Am I getting that right? I might be getting the name of that trim wrong actually, but yeah, you're not paying up for those, but at least you're not gonna feel as big of a fraud as the person in front of you at the Starbucks drive-thru who's also ordering a latte, but really in their TRD Pro, they should be out in the wilderness forging coffee from the ground and eating stale bark from trees and doing off-road in every single stupid situation they could put themselves in. No, they're also in the Starbucks drive-thru with you. So you're at least gonna feel a little bit more honest with something like this. And I have to say, with my use case, which is of course the desire to off-road every once in a while, but mostly just use it every single day, I would go for the SR5. It's cheaper, it has all the equipment that I would need for off-roading, the use case that I have, and I think it just looks a little bit cleaner than the higher end trims, which just look a little bit too in your face, in my opinion. Press and hold this button down, and as you can see, the rear window drops all the way down, the glass itself. And you have not only a little bit more airflow back here, but you have the ability to just put simple shopping bags or whatever, simple things, lighter things that you can lift up a little bit higher. You can just toss a bunch of things back there. And then when you're done putting some things in the back, through the glass, you just press the up button and the glass rolls shut once again. I've always loved this feature. It's not bespoke to the 4Runner, of course, if you know your Toyota SUVs, but I've always loved the ability to have a window that rolls down. I own a 2004 Land Rover Freelander. Unfortunately, it's ruining my life. But the one good thing about that car, otherwise an awful experience to own, is the fact that I could roll down this window, and then when I'm driving it at highway speeds, 75, 80, I can drive with the windows down because the air just goes straight through and then out the back window. You can drive the windows down at higher speeds if that's something that you like anyway. But if you need to carry more stuff back here, you have a manual lifting tailgate in the back of the 4Runner. I'm sure higher trims offer an electronic tailgate, obviously, but being an SR5, a manual tailgate will definitely do. It's easy to open and it's pretty easy to slam shut when you're done. And when you open it, you reveal a huge cargo area back here, and the ability to option a third row of seats is something that you can do as well. This 4Runner, of course, just has the typical 5-seater arrangement, which should be enough for most people. If you want to be carrying more than 5 people and go off-roading and do adventures and things like that, you might be more interested in something larger like a Sequoia. Back here, because this car doesn't have the third row of seats, I've got a massive cargo area that is not impeded by any seats or anything like that. There is still evidence, however, for the existence of a third row of seats, because you have a couple storage areas lining each end of the cargo area, which also have their own cup holders, which is funny because in this, it's not going to really be used. But everywhere in the back of this car, you have extra storage, and that's no bad thing. Again, if you want to option a third row of seats, you can do that back here, which is totally fine. But the 5-seater arrangement makes the most sense because it allows for the largest amount of cargo to be fit back here for a camping trip away with all your friends. And when it comes down to styling, which I touched on a couple minutes ago, I think it looks fine. I think the angle that you're looking at it right now, it looks a little bit wrinkly and hard to say. It just looks like a 4Runner that's wilted slightly. I'm not a big fan of the rear 3/4 view, but the front 3/4 view, in my opinion, is really where it's at. This thing looks more mean, more substantial, more hard-edged, and it looks like they tried a lot harder to make it look cool than they did with the Generation 5 4Runner. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Let's move on and see what rear seat room is like by hopping inside the cabin. I just hit my head going into the car, which is a really great feeling. So we sit ourselves back here on these base level cloth seats, which are, yes, not the nicest seats that you can get in the 4Runner, but I think honestly, they're pretty comfortable. I love this seat pattern that they have on them in the front and in the back. And I think given the fact that they're the base level cloth seats in the 4Runner, they look quite nice. But what I don't like as much is the fact that I don't have that much leg room at all. I have no foot room down there, pretty much none. I do have just a tad bit of headroom, but obviously I'm 6'3". This seat is in my driving position, so it's pretty much moved all the way back. The owner of this car is actually a friend of mine, and he's shorter. We'll just say that. So imagine if I was on a road trip in this thing, he was driving the car, this seat would be moved quite a bit further forward and I'd be a little bit more comfortable. But since this seat is in my driving position as the benchmark, as I like to do on my channel, I barely have any room back here. But honestly, for an SUV of this size that also offers a third row of seats, it's basically what you can expect back here. So complaining about it from me as a 6'3" tall person is a little bit far-fetched, but it's just something to know. It's not the biggest back seat you'll ever be sitting in back here, but for most people, for kids, for smaller people, or the smaller people that own the car currently, it's gonna be totally fine. Now I'm gonna take my hands and just touch the materials and see what it's like. I'm feeling lots and lots and lots of cheap plastic. Again, this is the base level 4Runner. I'm not sure if the higher end trims are gonna be much better than this, but the door panel back here is quite cheap feeling, but again, SR5, the base level 4Runner, it's what you can expect for one that only costs $40,000. I'm pretty sure the top level TRD Pro or Trail Hunter can go almost to $80,000. I haven't checked that, but I know it's a lot more expensive than it used to be as well with the 5th gen. So this interior, it's definitely built to a budget, but it's not really that big of a deal. Everything still feels sturdy and decently well built. Like this grab handle right here on the door has some texture and a little bit more care added to it than the rest of the door panel because it's something you're going to be touching quite often, and as a result of that, it feels rather sturdy and quite nice. And then you have a little storage area beneath that. I'm not sure what that's going to be useful for anybody, maybe sunglasses or something. And a cup holder right here to add to the cup holders that you already get in the center console fold down armrest, which is right here with tabs in them. It's going to hold your drinks in a little bit better than this cup holder on the door panel. But for the rear passengers in an SUV, more cup holders is always a good thing. And I have to say, overall, when you're sitting back here, it is pretty obvious that you are in the base level 4Runner, unfortunately, but everything still feels pretty decently well built and sturdy. Also in the center, we've got a couple air vents and some USB-C outlets for charging devices. So it's not like it's as well equipped as a dark, sad cave back here. You still have pretty much everything that one could ask for from the backseat of a 4Runner. So with that, let's see what it's like up front. Up front in the new 4Runner SR5, when you sit down here, if you've been in the new Tacoma, which I have, once again, there's a video linked on the screen at some point in the video, probably earlier, on the new Tacoma. This is pretty much the exact same as you can expect for a 4Runner. It's always been the SUV version of the Tacoma. So when you sit up here, it's pretty much exactly the same, except for the things that I'm noticing that are smaller or cheaper than they were in the Tacoma that I reviewed that was a TRD off-road, so it's a higher end model. Things like this screen in the center is obviously quite a lot smaller than the screen that I'm sure you can get on higher end trims of the 4Runner. It has these massive bezels on the sides, which as a thing that automakers do is something I really don't like, because it means that constantly for the rest of your ownership experience and for every subsequent owner of the car, you're going to be staring at the screen thinking to yourself, if I just worked a little bit harder and paid a little bit more money, I could have gotten the full screen. I wouldn't have to be looking at these cheap, awful, ugly plastic bezels. I always hate when car makers do that, but the fact that you still get a screen up here and a decent screen at that isn't the worst thing in the world. And then you move down and you see this climate control setup, which yes is really nice. I love the way that they made the two dials, the temperature dial and the fan speed dial, really chunky and gear-like, so they look really rugged and really strong and really industrial, so you can use them with work gloves when you're on the job site or whatever. It's obviously a styling gimmick, but it's something that I really like to see in something like this. It shows that there was effort put into the interior to make it feel a little bit more adventure-y and rugged and off-road focused, and I always like that, but I'm already noticing a lack of buttons and switches in here, namely buttons for heated seats, which aren't here, available on higher end versions of the 4Runner. And then back here behind the gear selector, I just have a row of 5 blank buttons. They don't do anything, they're just little squares that you can look at and admire as you drive down the road and think about, I wonder what that button would have been used for if I paid a little bit more money. I guess these are just nitpicky things that you can expect from buying the base level version of any car. So I really shouldn't honestly be complaining about it that much, but it's worth noting because some cars are better at hiding blank buttons and switches so that people that saved money on a cheaper version of the car don't have to feel bad about the fact that they spent less money on their car. That's what I'm saying. But you still do have the basic setup right here. Again, the screen is smaller, but it's still a touch screen that has navigation that you can get, and it's fairly basic when you compare it to other systems, but it has Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and stuff like that, I'm sure. So for most people, it's going to be totally fine. You have a digital gauge cluster, which I think is also a reduced size compared to higher end models. I did the Tacoma about a year ago. I can't remember if that screen was larger for sure, but I'm pretty sure it was. It'll be shown on the screen right now if that's true. And that's also an annoying thing, the obviousness of the small gauge cluster here that is flanked by a fuel gauge and a temperature gauge that are given way too much real estate in this dashboard than what they deserve. But the digital gauge cluster itself is kind of interesting. It still shows basic information. You can cycle through things like your trip computer, a compass, what music is playing, and you can show what safety systems are on, blah, blah, blah. But you can't show multiple things at once. You can't bring on a full screen map or anything like that, which is a little bit unfortunate. But what they do have as a consolation prize is the fact that you have this massive tachometer. That's basically the central design point of the digital gauge cluster in here. And I love the fact that the tachometer is shaped to look like a gear, just to really slam home that adventure point for all those people that forgot, that thought they were driving a Toyota Venza or a Highlander or something like that. No, that gear right there means I'm in a serious Toyota SUV, I guess. But there is one more complaint that I have about this digital gauge cluster. The fact that every single time I touch the brake, just like that, I see 2 little red lights show up in the digital gauge cluster. It's like a brake light inside the car. I think that's useful for towing for whatever reason. I've only towed once in my life before, so I don't really know that much about that topic, but for most people that drive around, it's going to confuse them for a while until they figure out what that actually is, and then they're going to think, well, that's really stupid. I guess in case I needed to double check that my foot was on the brake because I couldn't A, feel the foot that was on the brake, and B, feel the speed of the car that was reducing, I have C, The 2 red lights in the gauge cluster, it's just so stupid. And I don't know why every single Toyota SUV is doing this right now. The Sequoia, the Tacoma, which is an SUV, but you get the point. The Land Cruiser, I'm sure, is the same thing. It's so dumb and idiotic. I don't know why they did that. But then moving back from that, even though this is the base level 4Runner, you still get a really nicely trimmed steering wheel. In the center, it's this leather stitched arrangement over the airbag cover, and then around the sides where you're gonna be holding it with your hands, it's perforated leather. Also on the inside, you have media controls on the left, and on the right, controls for your radar guided cruise control, which is still here, even though, once again, I've said it a million times, this is the base level 4Runner. I complain about the smaller screens and the lack of buttons back here. At least you get radar cruise, which is a really important, nice feature to have, if you ask me. And to top it all, it's a 4Runner, so as is tradition, there's always been an effort to make it feel a little bit more old-fashioned than its competition. Things like, again, the climate controls, which are not buried in a stupid submenu, and a basic gauge cluster with only the information that you really need. It doesn't have a bunch of gimmicks that you can do, like the full screen map that I mentioned. Also, an infotainment system that doesn't really have that much to it. It's just basic, everything you need, nothing you want. But then to top it all, in the brand new 4Runner, you still have a mechanical arrangement for the automatic gear selector. You press a button on the top and you pull it into drive, reverse, back into park, whatever gear you're looking for. And if you're somebody like me or most 4Runner owners, you'll really appreciate that. Also, you have, to add a little bit of complication, a drive mode dial that also doubles as your control for your low range gearbox. That, thankfully, is just an electronic thing to make things a little bit easier for everybody, so you can have it in 2 high, 4 high, or 4 low. It's a traditional old school 4-wheel drive system, like what people who own a 4Runner want. So in the interior, even though it's definitely built to a budget with things like plastic everywhere and these blank buttons, it still feels like a 4Runner, and it still feels like they did a pretty good job. So with that, let's have a look at the engine and we'll take this thing out for a drive. Underneath the hood of the new 4Runner is where it's been the most controversial. That's because you used to be able to get a 4Runner with a V6 or a V8 engine at one point, but here in the latest Generation 6 4Runner, you can only get 2 different 4-cylinder powertrains. You can get the base level, which is what we have here, a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder developing 278 horsepower and 317 pound-feet of torque. Again, that's standard for the SR5, and it comes with rear-wheel drive standard if you're insane, or if you're like most 4Runner people, you can opt for 4-wheel drive, and that comes with a fuel economy penalty. 4-wheel drive models like this one get around 19 to 25 mpg, and the rear-wheel drive ones do just a little bit better. Better enough to make things worth it for a rear-wheel drive 4Runner? I don't really think so. But if you want the most amount of power and the most amount of towing capability, as well as probably the best fuel economy, you can opt for the upgraded version of this engine, which adds a hybrid component, making it the iForce Max 2.4-liter hybrid 4-cylinder that comes with 327 horsepower and 465 pound-feet of torque. That is 4-wheel drive only. Unfortunately, there's obviously no V8 offered anymore. It's been years, but there's also no more V6 4Runner. That 4-liter V6 that was in the previous one that was shared with lots of other Toyota SUVs is gone, but not forgotten, especially by 4Runner enthusiasts who think this car is the absolute worst thing in the world because it's a 4-cylinder only. And I can honestly get that, but times are changing, things are moving on. We need to be a little bit better to the planet. Even the 4Runner people have to see that. So what we have here is a 4-cylinder that develops, honestly, a pretty decent amount of power, so it should be fine out on the road. And on that note, let's see what it's like out there. Now, obviously, we can't fully test the capabilities of this 4Runner because we're going to be driving it just on normal public roads. Maybe sometime I'll get a chance to drive it off-road, but today, strictly on-road, just asphalt tarmac, which, to be honest, is where 99.99996% of Generation 6 4Runners, I don't know why I keep saying it Generation 6, but just bear with me. It's why all of them are going to be spending all of their time away from dirt, away from the off-road trail. They're going to be sticking very carefully to the pavement on their way to pick up the kids and then stop at Starbucks on the way home. That's just the fact. Most of these are going to be used for that purpose. So I think it's a good idea that we test, see what it's like out on actual public roads. And I have to say, so far, I like it. It's got all the off-road SUV characteristics, especially as something that is body on frame. The fact that I can feel every single bump that I go over in the road a bit more than I'd like. There's one of my fellow 4Runner brethren driving by in his V6 powered one. He probably hates mine because it's a 4-cylinder and available hybrid at that. Let's see what the handling is like here. Yeah, not great. Obviously. Lots and lots of body roll, no feel through steering, and the fact that I'm feeling every single thing I'm running over in the road more than I'd like. That's just the thing with body on frame vehicles. It's something that I've never liked about them, but it pays dividends off-road and with towing. Apparently this has a 6,000 pound tow rating, which for a 2.4, a 4-cylinder is definitely nothing to sneeze at, I would say. I also have to mention, I like this 2.4 liter 4-cylinder. It's just a little bit raspy and industrial feeling in nature, and I think that's a good thing in something like this. Let's hit it. Yeah, I kind of like that. It's just a little bit raspy. It feels like some sort of rugged machine, which is what you kind of want. But it's still smooth enough and quiet enough that it's reasonable to use every day. I guess it is a little bit louder than I'd like it to be, but honestly, you can't really complain that much. It's just a little 4-cylinder up there that is somehow producing over 300 pound-feet of torque and nearly 300 horsepower from just a turbo, which I think is pretty impressive. But of course, if you want more power available, you can get the hybrid version of the 4Runner. But if you're a more traditional 4Runner person, you want something a little bit more simple, something that's not going to break, then you might be more interested in the base level engine. I have a feeling, owing to what we've already heard about Toyota's recent hybrid powertrains, yikes, that this base level engine in the 4Runner is really going to be the one to have when it comes to longevity and reliability. And again, it offers, in my opinion, plenty of power, plenty of towing capability, pretty decent fuel economy given what the car is, and I think it would be just perfectly fine for 99% of people. This is the one that I would have. I'd have my 4Runner pretty much exactly like this one. And I think with radar cruise control that this car comes with, wireless Apple CarPlay, and the look and feel and capabilities that this car has as a daily driver for $40,000, which is still just a bit less than the average new car price, amazingly, I think this thing is a pretty decent daily driver that's going to work out for a lot of people. If you want something more rugged and cool and off-roady that has the capability, then you can still get a 4Runner. This is why the 4Runner remains on top of the world, because it has the capability, but also the usability and the cool factor that everybody wants right now in the off-road space, and that so many other car companies are really missing out on. With that, I'm gonna end that video there. I wanna thank my good friend Jose for letting me do a video on his brand new 4Runner. He just picked this up like a week ago. So I'm really grateful to be doing a video on it. And I'm grateful for all of you for watching along. So with that, like, subscribe, do all the normal YouTube stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.